Welcome to another What's the Point, where we talk about economic development in Wyoming and especially the state's role in economic development. Today, I'm lucky enough to sit down with our recruiting team. We have Chance Price and Wendy Lopez. And so I guess I'd just like to start out with a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and what got you to the Business Council. Wendy, let's start with you.
Cool. So I've been at the Business Council 6 years almost now, and before that I spent 22 years, I'm aging myself, but 22 years in the newspaper industry doing advertising, marketing, media sales. So, I'm a salesperson.
Yeah, but what about before that? Where are you from?
I am from Cody, so I am a Wyoming native. I am 5th generation. My family's lived here since 1885.
Whoa,
So,
that's before statehood, right?
And so I have some attachment to the state.
Good. Well, welcome. Okay, did you go to UW?
Absolutely. I got a degree in communications and a minor in sociology. So I learned how to talk.
Excellent. All right. Well, very good. How about you, Chance?
So I'm from Wheatland, Wyoming. My family also homesteaded here in the late 1800s, right in the southeast corner of the state, over by Lingle. Graduated from the University of Wyoming in 2011 and with a degree in history. And following that, I was in financial services for 4 years and with the University of the Alumni Association for 6. So this will be my 2nd year in September with the Business Council.
So you've seen the state a little bit then?
I have seen the state. I've got to tour around the state a lot with UW, engage with a bunch of UW alumni, nationwide, and kind of see their affinity for not just the university, but the state. So, yeah.
Okay. So let's break down some common myths and misconceptions about recruiting, especially as the state goes. So talk to me a little bit about recruiting in general. I mean, you both have a sales background at some level, and you definitely have sales personalities, which is, as somebody who loves sales and teaches sales, I love those personalities. But talk to me a little bit about, like sales and recruiting and how all that fits in this at the state level.
So basically we're sort of the cheerleaders for the state, the ones talking to companies that are thinking about moving to Wyoming or gathering information about a potential relocation or expansion. And so we get to just sort of talk through what those benefits are, those challenges, and that kind of thing. So we talk a lot about tax structure of the state.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people have this assumption that because we have such a favorable tax climate in Wyoming, it is a piece of cake to recruit a company here. Like, what company would not want to move to Wyoming?
They're all sitting right outside.
They're all sitting outside, just right over
Waiting
the
to come
Colorado
in.
border, just waiting to come in because of our tax structure. And if we just talk about that, we should be able to get them here. And then I think maybe some other misconceptions are like, we'll just take anything.
Yeah.
Like, just go get these companies, or who cares if they have 1,000 employees? We'll figure it out. Just go get something. Bring them here.
Yeah. So Chance, how about you? What have you seen?
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I also think that we have to take into consideration the communities that we have, and if it is 1,000-person operation, we can't cannibalize that community or something like that. And I also think that it's sales, but there's so much product development that goes along with it. There's it's so involved with the utilities, the real estate. What a grand undertaking it is for a company to expand or relocate, and the amount of overhead that takes, and how long it takes to foster those relationships, build that trust.
Right. Yeah. So let's dive into some of those. So I didn't know if we were going to get into that whole, well, we have low taxes, so everybody should just come, or we'll just magically want to show up. And of course, the first question is, well, why isn't that happening? And so it is a lot bigger than just the tax structure and all of that. So talk a little bit about some of the things that are really important to companies as they look at relocating, because the other part too is that relocating a business is not easy.
No.
Relocating a business is it's actually really, really hard. In fact, a lot of companies probably go out of business in that move or are trying to do that and need a lot of help. So talk to me about what people consider when you think about relocating a business and what that means.
So I think in the 6 years that I've been here, it has changed what they need and what they're looking for. I think the first couple years that I was here, it really was easier to talk about. We have a business-friendly tax climate.
Absolutely.
We were talking to maybe smaller, like family-owned companies that were feeling the press of wanting to move out of the state they were in because of a political climate or their tax environment or things like that. And so you didn't really get into the weeds as much maybe of what their power needs were or things like that. If you could find 5 acres or a few thousand feet for them, then they were probably a good fit for us and they were interested. And then once COVID hit and like reshoring started to happen and these bigger projects started to happen, more data center development and things like that, like it really did get into more of the weeds of the site selection process and what that means. Do you have land? Do you have power? Do you have water? Do you have sewer capacity? What sort of industrial sites do we have in the state? Where can they actually feasibly relocate at because of those needs? Those were just things that we had never really talked a lot about before. And those became much more intense. And because of some of the large projects that have happened around the country now, and they are looking more towards the middle of the US, and we sort of fall within that region, like power is king. Like being able to find power is the first thing most of these projects are looking for. And then where is the land that has that power available, and where can we put that? And then you start thinking more about like workforce and that kind of thing. But power is king.
Right.
And any site selector or consultant will tell you that right now.
Right. So that's something I know that you mentioned product development, which is something that we've got to think about, because you can only sell certain attributes for so long before people start to look at what's the whole package to me. What's my available workforce? What does the power look like? What's the space that I have? Will I be able to be successful? Does the community have what I want? So I know you all took a project on over the last couple of years when we started to really dig in and find out how attractive our communities are to outside eyes. So tell me a little bit about that.
Do you want to go? Want me to go?
Go for it.
Okay. So we hired a consulting company called Insight to come in and do analysis on our industrial sites around the state. So I think everyone thinks that they have a business park or an industrial park in their community because they have some acreage or they've done a little work on it. They've acquired a piece of land through one way or another and want to develop that into an industrial park. And it definitely takes more infrastructure than just having a piece of land. And so seeing the success of some of our communities that have actually developed really good business parks and industrial parks, we needed to sort of analyze and see where we might have some other successes in the state by having land available that's shovel ready. And so Insight came in and kind of did a deep dive data analysis of those sites around the state, looking at what their water capacities are, their sewer capacities, their power capacities, what the actual developable acreage of that site is, because even though you have 100 acres, you really might only be able to develop on 25 of that, depending on certain things that might be going on with that land. So they really kind of looked at that around the state and found that we were kind of lacking in what we have as far as product goes that would be competitive in a nationwide search.
Right, yeah.
And I think it's really interesting because you have local economic developers that are very proud of their communities, and it's easy to have blinders on.
Right. And
I think we may get in the weeds occasionally selling the lifestyle brand of the state, and that kind of nails it down to nuts and bolts, and we're looking forward to phase 2 of that project this year. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about how that recruiting relationship. We're gonna talk in a minute about sort of the outbound recruiting, some of the shows that we go to, some of the things that we're trying to develop and clusters and all of that. But talk to me a little bit about we've got a recruit. We tend to hear about them. In most cases, we tend to hear about them first, and then we kind of help them get to the communities that make the most sense to them, and then narrow it from there. Talk to me about how that process works, Chance.
Sure. So ordinarily, Wendy and I are the first touch, whether it be a trade show, email, phone call, anything. And we meet with them initially, I'd say 1 to 3 times prior to getting what we call their site criteria lined out. Now that nails down their power needs, their sewage needs, their workforce needs, existing building square footage, whether they want, a certain amount of acreage to build their own project. And I'd say we ordinarily identify, I don't want to put a number on, but ordinarily about 3 to 5 communities per lead to see if they qualify for that project. After we get that site criteria done, we codename the project and for lead disclosure rules that we have, and disperse it to the local economic developers. After that, they look their sites, see if they have a fit. They look their buildings, see if they're a fit, and then they submit those properties in a proposal to the company, and they take a look at them. They pick out what they like and conduct site visits after that.
Yeah, and so that relationship, and I know there are a number of economic developers around the state and in various communities, but also with sort of various experience to do that. That's an element of our product, right?
Yes.
Like that relationship is an element, and that in its best form, we economic developers know all the stuff that they have. They're able to put that together and get it to us or to the lead really quickly. But are there things that we're working on there? And I know that they have an organization that's working with them too, to really kind of make that as smooth as possible. Is that an element of our product, I guess?
I think one of the things we maybe identified through the Insight project is the local economic developers have to have a team on their side.
Right.
They have to be able to call up their local utility providers and get that information right away. And it needs to be accurate and that kind of thing. You can't just say, oh, I know someone who's maybe wants to sell this 50 acres and we could totally get some infrastructure out there. It can't just be theoretical.
Right.
It really kind of needs to be based in fact, and they have to be able to call up those team members, those good community partners, to get that information that they need that fits the needs of what the lead is looking for.
Yeah.
So we've really been trying to help them bridge some of those gaps that they've maybe had in the past and really get them to kind of work towards that. And some communities might be great for a larger industrial sort of project. That's what they really want. That's what they have a workforce for, that kind of thing. And there's other communities that might be a better fit for an outdoor rec type of project or a firearms project or something like that, because that's a fit for their community. So getting them to be okay with saying, this is maybe not the project for our community, or oh yes, this is a great fit for us. We will get this proposal done for you, get it sent to you. We would like to have them in our community. So really working with them to sort of figure out what's a better fit for them.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good thing to maybe talk a little bit more about is, and you mentioned this at the very beginning, where we should just take everything that comes our way, and no matter what, let's bring them in because we'll figure all the details out later. And I think we know that that's not an optimum way to solve the problem.
So you get saddled with a bad project.
That's right. That's right. But at the same time, those economic developers in those communities are feeling a lot of pressure, right?
Absolutely.
They feel pressure to do their job and to bring companies in, even though we know that recruitment is one element of economic development, and it should be almost the last element.
Yeah.
But let's focus in on that a little bit and talk about how communities do that well and where you've seen, and you don't have to name names or locations, but talk about their approach to right fits in my community. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So if you think about data centers, let's talk about data centers.
Yeah.
That's kind of a hot topic right now because of recent announcements and stuff. And I think there's maybe a misconception that a data center could go anywhere in the state. If we've got 100 acres or 200 acres, we could put a data center anywhere. but there's so much more that really goes into a project like that. It really does depend on where they can acquire power, like what that quick path is to being able to ramp up to their power needs, which can be 250, 300 megawatts, even 500 megawatts, but maybe they only need 50 megawatts to start with. How quickly can they do that? Can they do that within 18 months? Could they do it within 24 months? Is there water also available there? Is there fiber routes that go through there, like redundant fiber routes and things like that? Is there renewable power that is available through there? Are there projects that are going in the renewable industry that could also be a fit for that? So there's a lot of different things that go into it that maybe makes just a couple areas of the state right now kind of ideal for projects like that.
Ideal for projects like that. Chance, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think the evolution of thinking surrounding cluster development really helps that too.
Yeah.
So cluster development essentially is having a cluster of businesses in the same industry that kind of, they compete, but it's a mutually beneficial ecosystem. And I think we see it in a lot of different things, research and development here in Laramie. You have the firearms industry and Kogi and those sorts of things. I mean, if you can identify that and a community can really get behind recruiting that kind of industry, I think that ultimately the businesses benefit, the state benefits, and I mean, probably most important of all, the workforce benefits from that too.
Yeah.
So. And as Wendy said, I mean, there's so much that goes into this. When you talk about data centers, the amount of easements that you have to go through. I mean, you're talking interstate exits and those sorts of things, and that takes time and so much effort. But if you can identify those areas and focus on those industries, I think that it really gives us a valuable focus, and it gives the communities direction.
Yeah, let's talk about clusters a little bit because so you mentioned that the community wins, the state wins, the workforce wins. You left out an important component who I think actually wins a lot too, but sometimes it's harder, and that's the individual businesses. So let's talk about a cluster. Let's pick a manufacturing cluster. I happened to be up in Sheridan last week for the academy, and we were able to go and talk to some of the manufacturing companies there. They're in very different industries. All of them are in slightly different industries, but they all hire machinists and people who understand how to make things, frankly. And one of the questions that people have is, well, aren't you afraid of a new business, a new manufacturing business coming to town because they'll take your workforce, right? And and a lot of times the first reaction is yes. But what we saw up there was that all of the businesses had sort of already wrapped their head around it. And they saw it as a good thing because they could attract talent. Their talent could move between businesses really well. And so I was really encouraged by their approach to that because they didn't see it in a scarce way. They saw it as actually more is better for all of us because we can share employees. And some folks don't like what we do, but they like what somebody else does.
Right.
And we can help share employees and really get the best employees that way. And so I thought that was really good to see that model work positively.
And it ups the game of all those businesses too. They have to be a good employer. They want people to want to come work for them. So you never hear people saying negative things about those manufacturers because they all have to be a good place that people want to come and work. And I think the other cool thing about Sheridan is the college there has really addressed the needs of those businesses and have a great manufacturing program. So they're putting out skilled workers that can be there. And so it just sort of helps build that ecosystem in that manufacturing sector.
And that comes full circle because the first thing that at least on the recruiting visits that I've worked in and been a part of, the first thing that people ask for us is how easy is it going to be for me to get workforce? They don't think about taxes. They may think about power. But they think how easy is it going to be for me to hire and find good people? And what they get excited about, new recruits get excited about that there are other businesses in the area because they know how important clustering is.
Yep. And honestly, when we're touring a community with a lead, we try to take them to some of those other businesses. It's good for them to see them, meet them, hear the good, the bad, the ugly of their experiences. And then we also like to take them to the community colleges or any sort of training facility that might be there. There could be like a welding academy or something like that would benefit them. And our community colleges show really well to most businesses because they don't have that sort of support maybe in the communities that they're currently in. It's different. When you only have one university, you really rely on your community colleges and they are high quality.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Eventually we're gonna get to the what everybody thinks is the most exciting, things like trade shows and going out and visiting customers and touring these places to bring all of their businesses back to Wyoming. We'll get there eventually. But I think this is a good sign because there are so many other elements to recruiting. So let's dive in a little bit to the training facilities, the fact that we know all of the people, and then just how great our university and community college systems are for developing that workforce. You want to talk a little bit about how important that is, or how, like, the looks on people's faces when they're like, what do you mean you brought the president of community college with you on your recruiting trip, or whatever.
That access to those individuals, access to government. If you really need to take a leave to meet the governor, we can usually make it happen. So just that access to those resources are so unusual and not available in other places. So I would say that's pretty cool and very special when we bring a lead to town.
Absolutely. And accessibility, a huge selling point for our state. And one thing that I love about our community colleges, especially, and even places like Wyotech here in Laramie, is they're so student focused. They're so student and community focused, as it should be. And they just engage really well with private enterprise and put together curriculums that fit and are useful and really drive the needs of employers.
And you asked Chance and I what our majors were and where we went to school, and I don't think either of us said we were an engineer like some folks in the room, right?
I knew a guy once.
I'm not a chemical engineer. I don't know a lot of things. So we really have to rely on our resources. Like, you have to kind of be a jack of all trades and be able to talk a little bit about every single industry out there, so you don't sound like an idiot when you're maybe talking to a lead. But we also really rely on our partners in the state too. So if there's an energy project, we have to call up the Energy Authority sometimes for help, or the School of Energy Resources, or a community college, or other individuals like that. It's our responsibility to bring in that expertise because chances are we probably don't have it. We try, but we don't always have it.
But we can connect, and
We can connect.
And through our regional team as well, you've got folks on the ground. You can get to those answers really quickly and really kind of connect those people. And I do think it's a shock to businesses in other states how the access is and the reception is by us. And I always say, you guys have probably heard me, and you probably say the same thing. Like, this isn't just a show. Like, it actually gets better once you're here. Our existing businesses have that same thing, probably a higher level of access because you're here. And Wyoming takes care of Wyoming. And I think that's something that people don't always get. They don't always get that in other states. They may feel the love during a recruiting visit when everything is perfect and everything is well orchestrated. But I think one thing that Wyoming has is it's after the fact. You actually get to see the love in action. It's not just a show.
Yeah, and they know that they can call up any of those people or shoot them an email and they'll get a response from them. I was doing a site visit here in Laramie almost a year ago now with a little company that does some sensor technology and different things like that. And they have been trying for a number of years to get some meetings with their university partners that they're alums of this particular university. They both have master's degrees from this university and have tried reaching out to some of their partners there to try to talk about some different research stuff they would like to do and that kind of thing, and have not been able to get a response. And they got every meeting they've been trying to get here in Laramie at the university that they can't get at home in one day.
That access is super powerful. In fact, I think there's been a pretty exciting announcement at UW and through a very, very similar type of thing, where an alum said, hey, I think Laramie would be a great place. I'd like to come back. I'd like to bring a big, group of my team here and really start software development at a next level. And the speed with which that happened, is it all perfect and smooth? Of course not. But the speed with which it happened and the way people were willing to move things around to make it happen, I think that's pretty exciting.
Yep.
It is.
And even if we don't have all the answers for them today, we'll figure it out pretty quick.
We tend to take that for granted. I actually think that it's a huge selling point that we tend to take for granted, but it is important, that accessibility to decision makers, that accessibility to others in the state that can help them. It's a big thing. So okay, let's talk a little bit about what everybody thinks we do all the time, which are trade shows and going out and flying out to wine and dine recruits.
Right.
And let's talk about that because we have. Let's start with the SHOT Show. I think the SHOT Show is probably one of our biggest things. It's been something we've done for, gosh, how many years have we done the SHOT Show?
Forever, as long as the business council has been in existence, and that's 25 years, so probably right around that long.
Okay, so the SHOT Show is shooting, hunting, and outdoor.
Right.
Yeah,
Trades.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, Chance, you're fairly new to the SHOT Show. Hey, you've seen it now a few times.
Yep.
Talk to me about what the typical interactions are like, or what you're trying to accomplish.
SHOT Show is so interesting, because it encompasses, shooting, archery, outdoor recreation, manufacturing, all those sorts of things. I think this year there were 2,800 exhibitors. There's always, 50 to 80,000 people walking through there.
Right.
It's incredible. But it really gives us an opportunity to capitalize what we're good at and, really capitalize on our brand as Wyoming. So we are there, it's Saturday through Saturday of SHOT Show. Yeah. And it's go. I think that we have recruiting meetings every single day. Governor Gordon comes and goes around the show, goes to recruiting meetings with us, engages with the Wyoming companies there. We have 80 feet of booth space this year this year and last year. And we brought, was it 3 or 4 startups this year as well?
So we
in the
have
outdoor space
for startups that get to sort of be featured a little bit. It's our first little entry point into being able to exhibit there, and then we also have space that allows for 3 to 4 other more established companies here in Wyoming to exhibit at before they're maybe ready to go out on their own and get a bigger space. And then we keep some space for a recruiting booth, like a Wyoming branded booth, and things like that too. So then there's 13 other Wyoming companies, I think, that exhibit at SHOT. So it's not just engaging with potential leads, but also seeing how those companies are doing and making sure they're getting the recognition that they want and deserve and things like that too.
Yeah, I absolutely think the business retention and expansion of an aspect of SHOT Show has been enormous. And they have a great time there. They meet with tons of retailers, and I think it's been extraordinarily valuable for the startups. In the last couple of years, hopefully we'll get a chance to expand that years to come, and include at least a few others.
Well, you talked about our longevity that we have had there. I think we can equate that. If you want to talk ROI on something that we do, we can equate that to Weatherby being here in Wyoming and Caltech being here in Wyoming, because both of those are directly impacted from us having a booth at SHOT Show and being willing to talk to companies and talk about Wyoming and bringing them here and showing them what Wyoming has to offer.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about that. You mentioned relationships and the time it takes. So basically, if I understand the trade show correctly, a business comes and they say, we're interested in your state and we'll be there tomorrow. Is that how it works? They just kind of show up and they're just sitting there, bang, they're there. Or like tell me about Caltech, because Caltech is I would say it's probably it's a household name, but in some ways it's like how recruiting should work. which is completely different than how we think it works. So talk to me about that.
Well, do you want the pure unvarnished truth on that one, or do you want the sugar-coated version of that one?
Give me somewhere in between. You choose your own adventure.
So I remember distinctly how this one works because it was the day after the governor had been there, and the day after the governor is there, and you've been there with the governor. We keep you busy all day long. You're on your feet all day long. You probably get 20,000 steps in throughout that show. And the next morning, I am sitting there in our comfy chairs that we have at our booth. We have a pretty cool...
Which I want to remove, by the way, so that you can't just... but in this story, they're a good thing, so I don't know.
I'm sitting there, I'm drinking my Starbucks, and I see these two very nicely dressed gentlemen kind of standing there, hanging back, because there were some other people at our booth, at our table, talking to some of our other folks there, and I'm just sitting there gosh, I should maybe probably go talk to them. I just don't think they're here to get a sticker. Clearly they want something. So I pulled myself out of the chair and went over and talked to them. And they're like, hey, we're from Caltech. We're interested in moving to Wyoming.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
The
There's
rest
a
is
lot
history,
of process.
but I do think it's important to note that interested in moving to Wyoming and showing up the next day in Wyoming, there's a lot that goes on in between.
There's a lot.
What I like about the Caltech story is it illuminates the length of time. So how many years between that initial connection and them, getting to their home in Rock Springs now in Wyoming?
Right.
How many years?
Well, and it probably backs up 3 years further than that, because I think we set up multiple meetings while we're at SHOT Show. And I think even prior to me being at the business council, the year before I started, I think we had a meeting with Caltech at SHOT Show to sort of just talk about Wyoming and stuff like that. And it just never went anywhere. And I think we had reached back out to him a couple times, tried to talk to him, just never heard anything. And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, they're walking up to the booth and saying, hey, we're ready to talk to you now.
And even then, it's not, again,
It's not, no.
And this is the part that people, I think, sort of gloss over, is the work that is required. First, there's the initial, maybe these initial connections. And those can happen for a lot of different reasons. Being at the show, being intentional about who you're going to see, but realizing they have a business to run in the meantime.
Yep.
They've got to continue to create their widget. They've got to continue to keep their business going and making payroll and making sales and doing all that. It's not like they stop everything and then move. So that to me is pretty interesting, because they still have an operation in Florida. That's their main operation, and this is a new product line. And they said, we're going to take this opportunity to move to Wyoming. And again, that wasn't a super immediate slam dunk, right?
It was not. So it required kind of multiple calls. We had that initial conversation, and the SHOT Show is crazy. You don't have a lot of time to really get into specifics. So after everyone got home, probably 2 or 3 weeks later, I think we got on a Zoom, had some conversations, discussed what their wants, needs, desires were, why they were doing it. That's important. They didn't want to move from Florida, but they are completely surrounded now, where they had lots of land and they were out in the middle of nowhere, kind of where their location is. They're now completely surrounded and landlocked, and they can no longer expand anymore where they're at. And prices have skyrocketed in Florida, just like kind of everywhere else since COVID. And then knowing political climate everywhere, and knowing how friendly Wyoming is to the firearms industry, they thought it would be good to have an expansion in Wyoming, a second location that can kind of be that safe bet if anything ever happened to the Florida location. They're already sort of established somewhere and could easily move and make it quick. And so we talked a lot about that, and then we talked about, do they want to do manufacturing? Do they just want to do some logistics, shipping, warehousing type of thing, maybe some assembly work or some, repair work. And then they came out to do a visit, and we went through the whole process that Chance talked about, where they sort of fill out what their needs are, and we send it out to different communities. And it's really kind of funny with this one too, because typically when you work with a firearms company, they know that Weatherby's in Sheridan, they know that Gunworks is in Cody, they know kind of those more lifestyle sort of communities, so you really expect a firearms company to ask about those communities first. And oddly, Adrian, who I was working with, is a former pilot in the Navy, and he knew something about air currents and things like that, and really wanted to be on the western side of the state, specifically the southwest quarter and close to Salt Lake Airport, because he prefers flying into there. And so that's sort of where Rock Springs came up in the conversation. They happen to have a lot of buildings available at that time because of the downturn in oil and gas and all of that in that area. So there was a building that kind of fit their needs. They came out, they did a site visit. We took them to the college there. They were blown away by that. I think we also looked at Evanston and the business park there, which they absolutely loved. Evanston too, but I think when it came down to it, the path of going into a building that was already there rather than building something seemed to be a little bit easier for them and made a little bit more sense. So they ultimately chose Rock Springs, and they have machines in there. They have some people working in there. They've been waiting for some design and things like that, some engineering stuff, to be able to manufacture some very specific products that are coming out of the Wyoming location.
Nice. Yeah, so it's a multi-year process. It takes a while for them to feel comfortable. I mean, that's a big move for a business. I think it's hard not to sort of think, oh, it's pretty easy to relocate, but it's just, you can't underestimate the load that is on a business. Right. And again, you've got to make payroll. You've got to be making sales. You have to be out there doing your business. And moving is a tough thing. So Chance, you were mentioning before we got going today that it's getting pretty close to a big trip for us to Europe. Yeah. And talk a little bit about that and where that fits into our idea of cluster development and maybe some new industries that we're looking at.
Sure, I'll touch on that, and then Wendy can expand on. We, I believe, it's coming up right here in about a month. So us and our team, I think there's 5 of us going to the UK, are going to the World Agritech Summit. The Business Council is sponsoring that this year. And we're trying to really put a focus on that research and development piece that's going on right here in Laramie with the Plenty Project, and trying to educate ourselves as much as we can. And they have such interesting technology and people in the UK. We're bringing along partners from the university and from our local communities. And after the UK, we're going to pop over to Italy and take a look at their startup and innovation environment. It's really, from what I've seen, it's really special, and I mean a world-class innovation hub there in Milan. And we are also going to meet with a few people in the firearms industry. We have an ongoing project right now out of a community that's about an hour away from Milan. I would butcher the pronunciation, so I'll just stay completely away from. About an hour away from Milan. And we'll also have the opportunity to meet with a few trade associations there in Milan, I think, namely ConArmy. They're a firearm trade association, and kind of see what it looks like to put together a landing pad for foreign direct investment. Like, what's that look like? How do we take advantage of what we have right here? We have a foreign trade zone in Natrona County. How's that work? What kind of carrot is that to foreign companies and that sort of thing, especially in Europe? What's the market look like for firearms? What's the environment look like for firearms? I know they've had some recent regulation put forth in the last 2 years, so we kind of want to see what that looks like for their manufacturing operations, what their logistics and distribution stuff looks like. And I think it would be a really great opportunity, and it's interesting because people ask about the ROI of that sort of thing, and if they're going to come at some point, so we want them to land right here in Wyoming. And,
that's right.
I think Walther just this year is locating in Arkansas, and that was all based off of a mission trip that Sarah Huckabee Sanders took, and we kind of want to see what that looks like for our state.
Yeah, great. No, that's great to, I think, to go out on the offensive a little bit
Right.
and to be able to look in two different industries that are really important to us, right?
Yes.
The firearms and manufacturing, but also especially in the whole agriculture scene and,
Right.
and what that looks like next. So Wendy, what can you add there?
So what's kind of fun about that is you've got firearms, which is very mature industry here. We know that industry.
Yeah.
And then you have an industry like controlled environment ag and ag tech, which is kind of a newer industry to us, and one that, I mean, ag is one of our, core industries here in the state, but really kind of flipping that on its head and looking at it the way that Plenty does with the indoor farming and all the technology around that is definitely a new sector for us that we did not know a lot about. So we have really had to spend the last 2 years kind of educating ourselves on that industry and going to a lot of different conferences and shows, things like that all over the country. We even went to Amsterdam earlier this summer to attend a show and a conference there to kind of see the birthplace of indoor farming and what that looks like. And so this is sort of the accumulation of all that educating of ourselves that we've been doing in the industry and sort of like putting Wyoming out there as someone who's really interested in this industry and looking for companies that are interested in us.
Yeah, and so you have folks like Vertical Harvest who are really early on in the adoption of this, as well as Plenty, who are groundbreaking. And so it's kind of interesting how Wyoming could lay claim to to being the epicenter of some of this really new technology and the new way of looking at agriculture for certain crops, and saying, hey, we're going to take what we've been good at for a long time, agriculture, and we're gonna innovate on it. And I think what I find pretty exciting about this whole thing is you've got the university where you can have research being done, where you can train people to work in these environments and to really make sure that the industry takes off. Then you've got an anchor or two that are really solid in that market and really developing technology and farms that are going to go all over the world, and they're doing it from Wyoming, which is really cool. So for us to go out to these locations and make sure that we put ourselves on the map in the place where all of these folks are today, where the research is being contemplated and where can they go, it's really critical. And I think it's kind of that, a little bit of the pioneer spirit where we're saying, we're going to go out there and we're going to go figure out what we don't know. We're going to go put our name out there, and we're going to be able to utilize all these tools that we talked about, the connectivity to power, the be able to show that we actually can hook people up with the right people in the state to get things done, whether it's regulatory, whether it's investments, whether it is just leadership, whatever it is, we can take all those things and put it together. And how we can do that on what we would consider a pretty small scale compared to other places, but have big results, I think it kind of says a little bit about the way we recruit.
Well, and I think too, when we talk about this industry, people wonder when we're going to put a big old indoor farm here in Wyoming.
Right.
I don't think we're going to put an indoor farm in Wyoming. We don't have the population, even within, even considering the Denver market and stuff, there's just really not that highly condensed population
Compared to the other places
compared
where you
to
gotta
like
go.
Compton or somewhere like that where the farms are.
Virginia,
But there's so much technology
Right.
in those farms, whether it's lighting or water uses or sensors or different things like that. And that's what I'm super interested in.
Right.
And also going to some of these like very tech heavy conferences in the ag industry, there's a lot of data in all of that too.
Yeah.
So if you're doing digital twinning on how to grow a certain sort of thing, that is very highly intensive data. And where do you put data? You put data in a data center.
Yeah.
And we have data centers too. So I think it kind of fits just with a lot of things that we have going on right now.
Yeah, I really do think that we're putting a lot of intentionality around this hopeful R&D cluster here in Wyoming.
Yeah, and the idea of bringing in that know-how, being a place in Wyoming where people can come, they can enjoy all of the cool things about Wyoming,
Right.
and at the same time have others that are similar to them or be able to work closely with their, like Plenty has a lot of vendors that deal with all of the other things that you gotta do to run a farm. And to be close to the epicenter of that, I think is a really key component that we're trying to develop out. And in 10 years from now, we'll probably be having some pretty, goofy stories of a company who showed up at a trade show and said, hey, we want to move to Wyoming, and it just happened. But right now, we're trying to form that and figure out what's the best angle. And that's gonna take some risk, it's gonna take some investment. And I think as I look at what you have done in terms of not just going out and being the cheerleaders for the state, I think you've also taken a look inward and said, how do we continue to make our communities places where people want to be? And how do we develop our product of Wyoming in a way that makes recruiting easier? Because you can go out there and push all day long, but if you can't bring them back to things that matter to them and show them what they care about, we can run Super Bowl ads and it's not gonna happen.
Right. And I'm amazed every day by like the interconnectedness of all the industries too. Like you go to an ag tech conference and you don't think that you're gonna end up having a conversation with someone about sulfur that you can pull off of a gas well that can then go into fertilizer, and how they've been looking at some old oil field in parts of Wyoming that they think could be really good for that, or they're like, oh my gosh, Wyoming has a great CO2 pipeline, we need CO2 to do all this. So we do have a lot of really good assets, it's just making sure that we're matching it up with the right things.
Yeah. Well, if folks watch this and think it's still just a matter of, just like letting them in through our border and all of that, and it's just we just gotta put up a sign that says we're open for business, they might wanna rewatch it. Because
They might wanna rewatch it, yes.
Recruiting is one of those things where you have to have all of the foundational elements right to make recruiting successful. That doesn't mean that we should only work on the foundational elements, but it all has to work together. And when it does work together, it makes recruiting look really simple.
Right.
You know that it's not. And so I don't know, I learned a whole bunch of stuff today, and I think that the folks that are watching this will too. And I just appreciate you both being here and going out there and being, really, really thoughtful and intentional and smart cheerleaders for the state of Wyoming. So thanks.
It's fun to do.
Thanks for having us.
Heck yeah, great job.